Welcome to this second day of our masterclass. Thank you so much for joining again. What we're going to do today is cover the one question that we were not able to cover last time, which was the AI product science question. Now, this is basically a question where we have a very elaborate framework. The framework is called Forge, as you can see on your screen. And then at the end, we're going to talk about how to set up metrics with the North framework that we studied last time, right? So without further ado, let's just get into it. But first, we'll try and understand what are AI product sense questions, right? So in AI product sense question, what happens is you are asked a product sense question, but you are asked of an AI feature in that product sense question. So you are not asked to design Blinkit for kids. You are probably asked to design an AI assisted shopping assistant on Blinkit, right? So that is a new form of question that is coming to the market. A lot of senior product managers, AI product managers are adding this to their interview set, and that's what we're going to study today. We're just going to take a very simple example, and that is what we're going to study in the next 1 hour. So the example that we're going to take is very simple. We're going to take an example of designing an AI feature for LinkedIn that helps job seekers improve their chances of landing interviews, right? You have 4 engineers and 1 quarter to ship. So two very key important things that you have to understand in AI product sense questions. What are these two things? One is that the feature that you design, right? The feature that you are asked will always be an AI native feature. So you will be not asked to design a standard feature like any other question. You will be asked to design an AI native feature. As you can see here, design an AI feature for LinkedIn. So the interviewer will clearly tell you upfront that, hey, I'm asking an AI feature for you to ask. The second thing that you're going to be given in such questions is you're going to be given a clear constraint of the number of engineers you have, right? So that's the two things that you're going to be given. So design an AI feature for LinkedIn, and then the feature helps job seekers improve their chances of landing interviews, right? And then you have 4 engineers and a quarter to ship, right? Now, of course, this is something that we have to understand. The framework that we are going to have is called the Forge framework to answer this question. And then we are going to use the North framework that we studied yesterday to find out metrics. So let's try and understand this. The Forge framework stands for foundation, operators, reach, guardrails, and edge. So let's try and understand what we are going to understand here. So the first thing that we are going to see is we are going to understand the foundation of it, which is we are going to set up the base by using clarifying questions. So as you can see, what I have done is I've solved the question here, as you can see. So what I say is, hey, before I name a single feature to do this, I need to know the model layer I need to know what the model layer can and cannot do for this case, because that is what decides if it's a product problem or a research problem. With 4 engineers, anything that needs a research is off the table. So foundation is basically trying to set up the base of what is going to be the main piece of this AI product. Right now, an AI product is of course built through LLMs, which means that there is an LLM at the center of the AI product that you need to work around and that you need to use. The foundation ensures that you are setting that base. You're understanding what is it that you're going to use AI for in your interview answer. So you start with that. So basically you start with the fact that, hey, are we looking at a feature, or do we have or are we looking at the research part of it? If it's the research part, then it's very difficult for us to actually spend 4 engineers and do research, because LLM research is very heavy and very expensive. Instead, what can happen is, in the LinkedIn's job seeker use case, the relevant capabilities can be across 3 model cases, right? What are those? Large language models, embedding models, and multimodal models. Now, of course, if you don't know what these are, don't worry. This is something that, of course, an AIPM needs to know, but this is something that you can understand very easily. A large language model is the model that you use on a daily basis, right? Which is your ChatGPT, your Claude, and all of the bases that get covered from there. An embedding model is basically a model that allows you to embed all the data, right? So you have, when you implement RAG or when you implement fine tuning, what you have to do is you have to store the data, you have to embed that data. So an embedding model helps with that. And a multimodal model is, of course, for stuff like do you need audio, video, and an LLM is only text. So the first thing that you do in such a case, right? The first thing, I'll go back to the question. The first thing that you do in such a case is set your foundation, right? Which is basically set the core piece of how you're going to approach this particular question. The best way to do it is to go with understanding the base layer of the model you're going to use. Now here, since we are designing an AI feature for LinkedIn and the feature is supposed to help job seekers improve their chances of landing interviews, the goal here has to be that the product has to look at the profile of a particular user and it should be able to suggest some sort of interview practice. Right now, this is very simple. This is very similar to how your product sense question is, right? Because this is a feature that you are, already knowing that, hey, if I gave you the question of how would you design something for LinkedIn that improves their chances of landing interviews, you would probably go in that direction, use your circle that you discussed, prism we discussed yesterday, use that kind of a framework to come to a conclusion that, yeah, this is how we're going to design it. The difference in this case, or the difference in the AI product sense case, is that you don't do this, right? The difference in the AI product sense case is you take it a notch further and you actually talk about the models or the foundational models that are required to go about this, right? So that is the first thing that you need to do. Now, so this is basically what my question is like. Now we'll try and understand from our framework of what we need to do, what we not need to do, and so on, and then we'll try and attempt the question. Right. So of course, for an AI product sense now, what happens is, like I said, a regular question is around design a feature. This is around design an AI feature. Now, what are people listening for in this round? The first thing that people are listening for is, do you understand the difference between an LLM model layer versus the product layer, right? Very important for you to understand. Now, what is the difference between an LLM and product layer? An LLM layer or the model layer is where your product has a brain of its own in the form of an LLM. Whereas the product layer is where the product is your typical normal product. So to understand this, if you are building a chatbot, right? Now, the fact that responses of the chatbot come on a daily basis, one-to-one, that is a product layer, right? The responses that get displayed. But the way those responses get generated, the way those responses get created based on the input that the user is giving, that's the model layer. Let's take another example. Let's take the example of Granola, the meeting note taker, or Fireflies, the note taker. Now, the fact that Fireflies is joining the meeting on your behalf is the product layer. The fact that it is collecting transcripts from a particular Zoom call is another product layer. But the fact that the note taker is going ahead and transcribing it into summaries or transcribing it into shorter bullet points or whatever, this is the model layer. So the first and foremost thing that you have to understand when you talk about AI PM product sense questions in an interview is distinguish the model layer and the product layer. In the AI question that we just saw with LinkedIn, the product layer was more around LinkedIn, the surface area of LinkedIn, the job application, the job shortlisting and all of that. The model layer was when the interview gets simulated, what was when the interview preparation gets happened. So the first thing that interviewers are looking for when they ask AI product sense questions is, are you able to segregate the model versus the product? I'll give you one more example. Let's take Claude, right, or ChatGPT. Now, the fact that you are able to chat with ChatGPT, the fact that you are able to send a message, it takes that message, ingests it, all of that, that's the product layer, right? Because those chat products already existed. But the fact that it is able to make sense of what you sent, it is able to create a coherent response based on that, is the model layer. The UI is the product layer. An easier way to think of it is the UI, UX, the user interaction, the user display that you see, all of that is usually the product layer. The model layer is one step deeper, which is the inherent LLM generating content, generating context, generating stuff for your product, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing, are you aware of the costing of AI models, right? Very important. So are you aware of how you are charged by AI models? If you don't know, OpenGPT, Claude, Anthropic, etc., they charge you by the token, which is the cost. They charge you by per token, which means that your job is to create cost per query at scale, or to create an understanding of cost per query at scale for your product or for your LLM usage. So the second most important thing is, are you aware of how costing works in LLMs, right? So two things so far. One, can you segregate the model layer versus the product layer? Two, can you segregate or can you figure out what is the cost at scale for your work? Number three, do you know concepts like latency, hallucination, and are you aware of the concerns that happen with AI products? What are the safety concerns that can happen? Privacy concerns, data breach, etc., etc. Do you understand what is a moat in AI, right? What is something that others cannot repeat? What is something that others cannot do is the next thing that is there. And then, of course, can you tell where the product team has to work or the research team has to work, right? Very important. I know a lot of you might be seeing this kind of a breakdown for the first time, but it's very important for you to understand how to approach AI product science questions. It's very new. That's why, right, very new in the market right now as well, and it's evolving. But this is what people are looking for. Now, what are they not looking for? They are not looking for another five things. Treating AI as a black box, right? Not talking about the specifics of LLM. So if you are in a stage where you don't know LLMs, if you are in a stage where you've not studied about it, there is no way you're going to get past an AI product sense round. Why? Because the interviewers are expecting you to talk about an LLM. An interviewer is expecting you to talk about pointers regarding the LLM. If you ignore safety, compromise, misuse, all of that, then of course you reduce your chances. If you don't have a mental model or an inference of how costing works, then you're going to go away. And then if you confuse the product and the model layer, right? Like I explained in detail of what a product layer is, what a model layer. If it confuse both, then of course you have a tough chance. And then of course, when you don't talk about the real moat, when you don't talk about the real differentiator in AI products, you lose out. What makes you stand out? Separating research from product, very clarity about it. We'll see in the example as well. Naming some guardrail metrics, maybe a safety metric, copyright metric, etc., which the interviewer has. And of course, always in product interviews, right? Having a way by which the interviewer takes notice, right? The interviewer feels, I didn't know this. That is always a great way to stand out. Talking effectively about the cost, understanding how data will come in through an LLM and how you can convert it to your benefit. And of course, calling out second order effects, right? Saying that, hey, because we ship this or because we build this, what further happens inside our product, right? Those are a few ways to stand out. We'll take it step by step. We'll first focus on what they're listing for, and we'll do that by our simple framework called the Forge. Now, what is the Forge? Forge stands for Foundation, Operators, Research, Guardrails, and Edge, as I said. And each of this step is designed to give you the right understanding of what your interviewers are wanting for. First, let's see Forge. Now, what does Foundation stand for? Foundation is the model layer, right? This is basically talking about the capability of the model, the latency, the cost associated, the failure modes required. What basically can your model do and what is it bad at, right? When I open this, I'll see basically you talk about three things in the foundation. First, what are the capabilities of the model? What is the economics? And what is the latency? So if we take our example of the LinkedIn example that we had taken, someone is trying to go ahead and ask you about, hey, how are you going to design this AI feature for LinkedIn? The first thing you do is you break down it into three pieces. What are those three pieces? Capability, economics, latency. So you basically decide each of these three and talk about them. Now, when I say talk about them, basically critique on it. So in an AI product sense round, right, it's not like a product sense round where your ideas are valued or where you have to come up with something new and something funky and all of that. In an AI product sense round, the thought process is a little different. The thought process is more towards a tech round where knowledge is premium. So the fact that you realize that, hey, whatever model we are going to use, if we require to build an AI product that allows you to take interviews on LinkedIn, the first thing that we need is the capability. So talk about what do you need for that model, right? So if I was to simply ask you, if there is a model that requires to do mock interviews, then what do you need? Of course, that model needs to be, well reasoned. It needs to be an expert on the domain that you want to do a mock interview on, maybe product, marketing, sales, whatever. Then it needs to be multimodal. Why? Because it needs to be open to ingesting videos and giving out video outputs, or ingesting audio and giving out audio outputs. So that is what you talk on capability, right? I've given some examples of DALL-E as well, where we've said that, hey, how do you grow ChatGPT image generation in 3 months? So that's another AI product sense question. But the first thing that you talk about essentially is the capability. So as you can see, what I've written here, or this is an example, what I've written here is where I'm talking about what do I need from there, right? So of course, a normal large language model is going to be able to handle resumes, right? But I will need multimodal models to be able to create video interviews or amazing video interview experiences. Similarly, I will require some embedding models so that the questions that are asked, right, the questions that the interviewer, the AI interviewer that asks, those questions are great. They are relevant to the job description and are able to figure out similar questions. So essentially what we talk about first here is the capability. Then we talk about the economics. Now, to do something of this scale, right, to do a video interview of this scale, what is the kind of money that is required, right? Now, of course, like I said, you have to have the knowledge of it. You have to understand this. Basically, what is the cost that you're going to spend on this money, or what is the cost that you're going to spend, broadly speaking, here? Right? So here I've done the breakdown of that cost. So if LinkedIn has got roughly 1 billion total members, around 200 million would be active job seekers in a given month. Now this is, let's assume that it's only used by 10%. We still have got 20 million users. Now if each user does 5 LLM calls in a month, the average of $2 per call is $2 million a month in running costs. So $24 million a year from there. Right? Premium subscriptions for LinkedIn pay like a few $100s a year, which means that, this economics cannot work unless we are gating this to premium or super premium, because the cost is very high. Now, if you see, the only number that you need to know here is the $2 per call. Rest everything you know. The fact that LinkedIn has got billions of users, the fact that 10% of them may be assumed to be active, the fact that each one of them may be using 5 times a month. These are all simple guesstimates. The $2 per call is something that you should know, right? You should know what typical cost for a Claude API is. You should know what a typical cost for a ChatGPT API, and so on and so forth, right? So there are 2 artifacts. I've pushed both links together. So both the links are there, which are available here. So you can see each of them, right? So this is the second piece that you talk about, which is the economics. The last thing that you talk about is the latency. Now, latency is basically where you talk about the experience or the time that the model takes to come out. Now, of course, here, because it's a video model, because the output is going to be video, you can talk about the fact that, okay, to typically generate a video of this length, it's going to take, a couple of minutes, where we need to ensure that the experience is broken down into a way by which it feels real time, and spend some more money to ensure that the latency is low. Now, you don't need to spend a lot of time on ensuring how you will improve latency, because that's a technical role. But what you do essentially is you talk about the cost, you talk about what is it going to be, what is the kind of capability the model will need, and you talk about what is the latency that is going to be present. So the first thing that you do whenever you are presented with an AI product sense question is you talk about the capability, the economics, and the latency. Right. Once this is done, you move to the next piece, which is operators. Now, operators is very similar to your product design question. When you talk about operators, you talk about your user personas, right? So here I have said your power users, tech forward users, and low fluency users. So if I just go here and do operators, I'm again breaking it down into 3 kinds of operators. The active applier, which is someone who applies around 40 million people globally. They apply, consistently and regularly. Then an urgent searcher, so someone who has the requirement of a job urgently, has very high intent, and has been laid off, or maybe running against a visa or stuff like that. The passive opportunist, which is people who don't really are applying, but they, if there is an opportunity that comes, they may consider, right? So what is this? This is very similar to how you break down your users for a product sense question. You do the same for an AI product sense question, where you take 3 or 4 segments and say that one of this is the one that I'm going to chase. Now, the best way to do it is to pick up one of them which you feel is the right one. Here, for example, the active appliers is what I have picked because they are large enough to move the metric, and also they will give me immediate feedback. I don't need to wait for a lot of time to get feedback from them, and so on and so forth. So that very straightforward way of shortlisting, very similar to how you do this in your product sense questions, but you need to understand the only thing that is different is your major focus in this case, right, in the AI product sense question is on the behavior of users and segmenting them on 3 or 4 behavioral segments like power user, tech forward, early adopter user, late user, urgent job searcher, stuff like that of what we have done right now, and then use that to understand or use that to create a overall bracket of users that you are going to target. Right now, you can have each of these, you can have any of these. Typically, the most common one is the one that most people pick, and that's what I would recommend you to pick also in an AI product sense question. It's good that way. So you start with that, and then you move to the next piece, which is reach. Right now, this is where you talk about the UI of your AI product. Remember, so far you've been talking about the model layer. This is where you talk about how the UI is going to look like. So this is again very similar, your question that was your product sense question, because there you talk about the solution, you talk about how it should look and feel and everything, but there the solution comes after quite a while, right? Because there the focus is on the pain points, there the focus is on the user personas and all of those. But that has changed in the AI product sense question. In the AI product sense questions, interviewers want you to move fast. So interviewers are actually telling you to take a faster step or telling you to move further or faster in this to ensure that you are able to come back with a stronger answer towards the solution. So the third thing that you do is you talk about the reach, or how is the distribution of the product going to be. So for example, in the LinkedIn example that we've been following, we are going to talk about, hey, how are we going to build it? So this is going to be a single news surface in the LinkedIn app. It's going to be called Career Coach. It's going to be a chat-led space where users come in. I would ship 2 tools, one to share the chat and one analytical place to see some numbers and feedback. The chat is the entry point, and then I'm just collapsing it into one page where whatever your users can do. So essentially what you talk about here is you talk about what is the product layer of your product, what is the UI is going to look like, how is the UI going to feel like, basically the part which you do in the product design question. But here it's a lot more straightforward because you're telling that, okay, this is the model, these are the capabilities of the model, this is the economics, this is how we're going to handle latency. Now I'm coming back to my users, and now this is how my users are going to see this. Then we look at the guardrails, right? Of course, for all AI products, the guardrails are extremely important because almost everything can be misused when it comes to LLMs, when it comes to AI. So that is something that you have to be careful about. So everything that can be misused will be misused. That's the assumption that you go with as an AI PM, and you talk about these 4 things. So what are those 4 things in the guardrails? What is the likely misuse? So talk 2 or 3 points about what can be a potential misuse of the AI technology that you're giving. Second, so for example, for the LinkedIn example, a potential misuse could be, people could interact with that interview bot in an incorrect way. People could, abuse it. People could send irrelevant stuff to it. So they could misuse it. Second is copyright. So people could paste, copyrighted books in that LinkedIn chat, and that could become a problem for LinkedIn because it's going to give out copyrighted answers to stuff. Harmful content, like I said, violent content, sexual content, hateful content that could go inside those chatbots, or the chatbot can say to the end user. And then the cost, right? Which is if someone wants to use that feature for 10 times a day, 50 times a day, 100 times a day, how is that going to blow up? So these are 4 things that you need to say as guardrails. So after you've talked about the model, after you talked about the users who are going to use it, after you talked about how you're going to reach to the user, you need to talk about the guardrail. For our LinkedIn example, The guardrails are very simple. So here we've talked about 6 guardrails instead. We've talked about resume hallucination, which is basically AI should not invent metrics. So it should not randomly invent some metrics that are not there. It sees your resume and randomly asks you a question of, hey, when did you increase active users at Samsung, whereas you've never worked at Samsung. So that is one thing. Then of course bias, which is the second thing, which is the fact that it should basically not go ahead and give answers that are extremely biased. We've seen this with ChatGPT, with Claude, etc., where the answers that they give are extremely biased, and that's why it's they try to say positive things about you. So that's something that shouldn't happen. Then trust erosion, of course, the recruiters should not feel that, hey, this AI interviewing is something that isn't trustworthy. People are easily able to game it. The cost runway, we should talk about the amount of money. We've already discussed $24 million a year in the first slide when we were talking about it. So the amount of money it will take to create this kind of bot or this kind of an interviewing experience. Then of course the privacy concerns, and then can the outcome be inflated? Can the bot or the LinkedIn bot say that, hey, yes, you're going to get shortlisted, whereas the outcome may not be that, right? The outcome may be that you're far away from getting shortlisted. So what you do after this is you write down the guardrails. 4 or 5 is enough, 6 is great, and you use these 4 parameters to mention the guardrails to your interviewer. Now, once this is done, you finally talk about the edge, right? What is the moat of your product? Why building this makes sense? So in this case, of course, what you need to talk about is the scale of users. Basically, what is happening because of this product that cannot be copied by someone else, right? So what is happening by this product that cannot be copied by someone else? So in the LinkedIn AI coach example that we've taken, let's look at that, right? One is of course the outcome, right? You have people, millions of people and their application data. You have millions and people and their skill level based on the AI that has evaluated them. So that's something that's extremely difficult to get for anyone. So no one can replicate that, right? That is why it's critical to have this. Second, the recruiter side context, right? Which is saying that none of the data that is there, none of the companies that are getting filled, none of the roles that are getting there are available publicly. So they are all exclusive to LinkedIn. So what kind of questions do recruiters want? What kind of questions do people answer? Where do they falter? Where do they not? What kind of people get hired? All of this data is a moat that only LinkedIn has, right? And of course, distribution, right? People are already in a job searching mode on LinkedIn. Having this as an additional support to them becomes such an easy way to, plug this product into what we are doing and then use that, right? So that is what you go ahead and do. So essentially, you answer this question with first the model, then talk about the users or the operators, then how is the model going to reach these users? What is the product layer there? Guardrails that are going to work against AI, and then what is the moat, or how are you going to create the moat towards this, right? Those are the 5 things that you need to talk about. Now, this is a very different kind of approach towards your typical product sense questions, right? Your typical product sense questions, you talk more about pain points, you talk more about users, you talk more about all of that. Now here what happens is you talk less about that. Why? Because in an AI product sense question, unless explicitly said, unless the interviewer has explicitly told you that, hey, I want to talk about the pain points, I want you to find pain points more and all of that, they want you to talk about your AI knowledge, which is why it's advisable to spend more time on the AI parts of things instead of spending more time on product sense. So most of the times what will happen in AI product sense questions is they will not give you a vague problem. They will give you what you need to build clearly. So they will give you that you need an AI feature that requires people to improve their chances of landing interviews. So they're going to already give you that direction that, hey, this is the feature you have to build, instead of, giving you a generic direction. And also the expectation from them is that this person is going to talk more and more about AI. Right. Now, once you finish this, you don't end with this. You tell the interviewer that, okay, is this something that we are good with? Take some feedback and then move to trying and finding the second part of what we learned yesterday, which is metrics, right? So you don't stop an AI product sense question after talking about the AI pieces that we just did. After that, you supplement it with metrics. So here I have the same framework that we discussed yesterday. I'm going to take this example and talk about it, which is North Star, output, reaction, tree, and hazards. So North Star, you again talk about what is the North Star here, which means that you need to talk about one metric or one goal. As I can go back to the North metric here, 1 minute. Right, you need to talk about one goal and connect it to the company's outcomes, right? So for the LinkedIn AI coach, of course, the thought process would be to figure out what is that one major activity. So here what I've selected is weekly active job seekers who have received at least one interview request in the past 4 weeks. So people who have taken at least one AI interview, or people who have taken at least one interview in the past 4 weeks. Now you can play around with it. It could be 2 weeks, it could be 4 weeks, 6 weeks. That's absolutely fine. The main goal is that the North Star is weekly active job seekers who've received at least one interview request in the last 4 weeks, right? Now, of course, you need to further break this down, right? The North Star is not going to be enough. You need to further, as I told earlier as well, you need to further break this down into how is it related to business outcomes. So of course, for LinkedIn, if more and more people spend time on, taking their interviews, it becomes better and better for them. If more people spend time on taking the AI interview, the chances of them getting shortlisted or filtered in the past even get better or even keep increasing. So all of that keeps improving over a period of time. And that is why this is a North Star that you will take. Same framework that we discussed yesterday, just applied for this particular question, right? So I've written a sample answer here for you to read as well, which is, the North Star, I would say, is weekly active job seekers. And then I'm going to take about, hey, the North Star has to roll about to business outcomes. So LinkedIn's revenue comes from premium subscriptions. Active, successful job seekers correlate with all three, which is why, active job seekers take premium more. Active job seekers will apply for my talent solutions, will also take up my interview prep, and will also see more ads, right? So that is how we are going to say. The alternatives could be, the interviews completed, resume generated, but I think weekly active job seekers is the best to comprise all of this. Now, like we discussed yesterday, we are going to talk about outputs, which is what is the creator and consumer side, or what are the different outputs expected. Now, for LinkedIn as well, there are two sides. There is the job seeker side, and then there is the recruiter side. So I'm going to write down the outputs for the job seeker side. So the first output is tailored applications sent. Second output, career coach AI sessions per week. Third output could be the application analytics that you see. Fourth output could be the free to premium conversion from LinkedIn. Similarly, on the recruiter side, you would have outputs around recruiter response rate, how fast the recruiter is responding, then the recruiter NPS. Another, you can add more as well, the number of candidates shortlisted, the number of interviews taken, and so on and so forth. So essentially the same piece that we discussed yesterday, which is how do you write outputs? The only thing in this case is you, of course, break it down into job seeker side and recruiter side, and then both of them you use to understand which one of them makes more sense and which one of them is the one that you're going to pick, right? So the best way to say is to pick up, one each, or to pick up one side and then try and figure out multiple outputs for that one. It's up to you how you want to do it. But yeah, the thought process is to break it down into outputs and use it. Now, once the outputs are done, or once you've written down the outputs, you then talk about the leading and lagging parts, right? So the reactions. Now you talk about what is the leading part and what is the lagging part. So here I have written 5 reactions, right? So the resume completion rate is number 1, right? So this is basically a leading indicator. More people who convert and complete their resume via AI are likely to take more AI interviews via this. Then rewrite acceptance ratio. When AI has rewritten their resume on LinkedIn, then how many people are saying, yeah, this is a good one, I accept. Third, how the conversations with their career coaches are happening, which is the AI career coach. So basically when they send a message, when they ask, when they wait for a response, how is the interaction there? That is another reaction that we are going to act here. Then session continuation rate, which is how the session is continuing, how many people are continuing with the session till the end. And then what is the sentiment in the chat, right? Is that a happy chat? Are the users feeling comfortable? Are they discussing properly? And so on, right? So like we discussed yesterday as well, from the outputs that you pick, in this framework, you have to convert it into reactions. And those reactions have to be leading and lagging. Now, lagging is of course the North Star for us. So here, as we see, the North Star is monthly, looking at, what is going on. Output is of course weekly, and then reactions is daily and hourly, right? Just North Star is at the top, then outputs, and then reactions. And then you just have to put this into a tree, right? So here, that's exactly what I've done. I've put the North Star at the top. Then comes your outputs, which is your driver 1 and driver 2. What is the output? Active job seekers in the period multiplied by the percentage who get a AI interview request. Then your further ones are, how many people use your career coach, how many people are existing job seekers, how many people have great applications, and how many applications are sent per user, right? So essentially, you break down your entire tree, or you break down your entire outputs that you get, or the entire North Star, output and reaction, all three together, into this metric tree. It's okay to do it on a whiteboard as well. You can take that call and say that, okay, I'll build it out on a whiteboard. I'll build it out properly on a clean whiteboard and see that. All of that is absolutely fine. But yes, it's important for you to start off with a North Star, to start off by seeing that, okay, this is the top level of what I want. Then break it down into your outputs, which is saying that what are the specific outputs that you want to look at, and then look at the reactions, which is what is the sub layer after that, and finally put them all into a tree. Of course, finishing off, you have to talk about hazards, which is basically saying that, you already have talked about the guardrails in the past when you're talking about AI. So you can use that itself here. So you can say that, hey, partly we've responded around safety, copyright. So here you can, of course, talk about those hazards again, which is saying that, hey, the quality of the response that the AI recruiter gives, then, how is the demographic that is using this? Is this leading to like a lot more applications? Is it leading to a loss of trust amongst the recruiters? Or are people not taking premium? Is our premium getting cannibalized because of this, and stuff like that? So basically, you end up completing your North framework that you had here, which is basically completing all of these one by one and presenting a consolidated view, which is here in the final call, which is talking about, how do you go ahead and build an AI agent or an AI interviewer or an AI interview helper for LinkedIn, right? So foundation, operators, reach, guardrails, and edge. And then, of course, you talk about your North Star, your outputs, your reactions, your tree, and your hazards. And that completes your AI product sense interview, right? Of course, each and every piece of this requires further exploration. Foundation requires you to know really, really well about models. Operators require you to know a lot about, your kind of users, how you break down those users, how you understand whether they are right or wrong. Reach requires you to know what is it that you have to reach. Who are the kind of users that you have to reach out to. Guardrails is what you require to reach out to, or what you require to see as, how do I put it? Guardrails are basically all the negative things that can happen with AI. Edge is when you look at what is the moat or what is the differentiation. And then, of course, metrics is the north, where you talk about your North Star, your outputs, your reactions, your tree, and then your hazards, right? I'll quickly just summarize it again as I see some comments. So what we are trying to do here is, you are going to be given a AI product sense question that sounds like this. It's going to be around design an AI feature for LinkedIn that helps job seekers improve their chances of landing interviews. What is going to happen is, you will not focus on the product sense parts of things. You will actually focus on the AI product sense part of things. The way to do that is with a simple framework called Forge. What is that? The first thing you talk about is the model. So you talk about what is the capability of the model. Maybe I'll show it here. The first thing that you talk about is the capability of the model, which is, how are you going to talk about what model is going to be there? How are you going to use, what do you need out of that model, right? Your capability, economics, and latency, right? Second thing that you talk about is the operators. Now, this is the people who will use the product. So you segment them out one by one and pick one of those segments. Third is about how will you reach. So what is the UI layer that you're going to build so that these people can actually use the product? Fourth is then the guardrails, which is where you will talk about what are the negative things that can happen in this. And then fifth is the edge, where you're going to talk about why this is defensible, why someone else cannot copy or cannot build the same outcome as us in a short amount of time. Right? So that is how you need to go about it, or that is how you need to create an AI product sense question. Once the question is answered, you then move to north, which is a metrics part of it. We've already done metrics last time as well. The same funda applies here again, where you start with your North Star metric. Then North Star metric is your core top metric. Then you talk about certain outputs, which is what are the outputs expected on the all kind of users. So here in LinkedIn, recruiter side and job seeker side. Then you talk about the reactions, which is what are the actions that these people are taking. So a recruiter is, shortlisting profiles, a job seeker is applying to jobs. So what are some of these actions that you're going to take? And then you're going to roll it all up into a metric tree. This metric tree is what you will draw in front of the interviewer if you're given a chance on a paper or on a screen share. And you tell them that this is my North Star. These are the outputs that I'm optimizing for, and these are the final level of reactions and actions that are going to be there. Once this is structured like this, it gives you a great chance to, present it properly. And then finally, you talk about hazards, which is what are the problems that can happen with this. There are 3 hazards that we studied yesterday as well: cannibalization, misuse, and identity drift. So all these 3 are what you need to talk about. In this case, in an AI, cannibalization and misuse is the most important one, because identity drift, of course, is not as important in this case because we're building an AI product, so it's fine. But cannibalization and misuse is what you will talk about in the AI products and use that. So that is essentially how you solve an entire product. I've done a proper example solved as well. I've shared the artifact. So do read through this as well. I wanted to spend this hour to give you like a good brief of how you attempt these questions. But now it's your job to take all of these questions and practice it, see the example that we've done, and give a lot of practice from there. So I'll be uploading both of our videos on my YouTube channel. The artifact is also going to be there in the description for you to practice. So please do check them out. Of course, what we did is, maybe less than 1 or 2% of what we end up doing in the program. So if you're looking out, or if you feel that, you want some more tailored help or proper help, do feel free to check out the program. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining. I'm just going to drop in the link of our website as well, so that you can check this out. So please do have a look at it. You can download the brochure, or you can just connect with me on WhatsApp. And if you need some help, do let me know. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining. I know we packed a lot of stuff into this, so I want you to watch it again and again over YouTube, so that you get, and then reach out to me if you have certain specific doubts. And of course, if you feel that the program can help, do consider that as well. So thank you so much for joining in, and I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday.